Walid Faris is a Newsmax foreign policy analyst and former Trump foreign policy advisor. Mariam Wahba is a research analyst at the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. Welcome.
Thank you.
Good to be with you.
Finally, peace in the Middle East, and President Trump saying this.
Generations from now, this will be remembered as the moment that everything began to change, and change very much for the better. Like the USA right now, it will be the golden age of Israel and the golden age of the Middle East.
It truly is a golden age. Walid, let's talk about the partnership between President Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Without that bond, could this have even been possible?
I doubt so, because for 2 years before, or a year and a half, with the previous administration, none of this was done. It was the determination of both leaders, the American leader, the Israeli leader, to make sure that they can do two things. Number one, free the hostages. That was a trauma for the Israeli people. It was done. Of course, there is the question of remains, and I'm nervous about it because in a previous case in Lebanon, Hezbollah kept one soldier for a long, long time before they, the remains of that soldier before they release it. But at this point in time, there is a wind that is pushing for the peace process. The coalition formed by the president at Sharm El-Sheikh is impressive. He has done it before, remember, in May of 2017 in Riyadh. He addressed 50 to 52 Arab and Muslim leaders. So the dynamics are here now. It's not just the beginning of peace. We have to pay attention, as your correspondent has said, for the protection of that peace. And the protection is basically the disarming of Hamas. And that's a whole difficult discussion.
True indeed, Walid. President Trump, he headed to Egypt right after his historic speech in Israel, gathering with world leaders to sign a deal to end the war in Gaza. The document outlining rules and regulations on what's ahead for Gaza. The president saying Gaza's future would require Hamas to be demilitarized. Mariam, this is so true. And guess what? The Arab leaders, starting with Turkey, Qatar, Egypt, even Indonesia, are actually on board. So this has an opportunity, unlike the past, for actually being executed. What's your reaction?
I think you're on the money here. Look, there's been different ceasefires throughout the last 24 plus months, and we've seen Arab and Muslim leaders pressure Hamas, but apply different levels of pressure on Hamas, whether it was Qatar or Egypt or Turkey. I think what's so special about this moment and what President Donald J. Trump has been able to accomplish is really get these Arab and Muslim leaders on the same page. Even during the signing of the ceasefire agreement, we saw POTUS flanked by Turkey, Qatar, and Egyptian leaders. And I think that makes this ceasefire probably the most successful we're going to see so far. I think looking forward to the next hours and days and weeks, what I think I'll be watching for is just how much these Arab and Muslim leaders are going to be willing to hold Hamas's feet to the fire when it comes to holding up their end of the deal. Obviously, we're seeing Hamas struggle in Gaza right now. They're attacking different clans and different gangs that are anti-Hamas. And I think this is really an important time for these Arab leaders to step up and do what's right.
Well, turning to this, Ukraine President Zelensky heading to the White House later this week. We are potentially expected to see greater progress there with this meeting. Of course, the United States is now giving Ukraine offensive weaponry, Tomahawks. Walid, can you talk about where we stand right now, given what occurred in Israel with respect to the Ukraine-Russia war?
Precisely. The strategy of President Trump, it seems, is to bring peace to multiple spots: Armenia, Azerbaijan, Gaza, Israel, other spots in Africa that we don't speak much about, India, Pakistan. So he's like surrounding the conflict between Russia and Ukraine with all these successes. So now, I don't want to say it's embarrassing for Russia and Ukraine, but it is a big pressure. And now he is consolidating the support to Ukraine just to show to the Kremlin that there is a kind of a balance of power, that this war is not going to be forever. It doesn't have goals anymore. So this will be a preliminary phase before he actually speaks with President Putin himself. That's the key for the Russians, a summit between the two.
You know, Mariam, in the spirit and in the name of your organization, Defense of Democracies, this peace deal in the Middle East, and if President Trump, and we know how relentless he is in terms of brokering deals, if he's able to do it, and I believe he will, in terms of broker peace between Ukraine and Russia, it is truly a defense of democracies. What's your reaction?
Absolutely. I think you're, again, right on the money. I think what is notable about this moment, what is notable about this president, is that he has really made it a personal goal to end all wars, to end all bloodshed. And we're seeing that play out in different regions of the world. As our colleague Waleed just pointed out, obviously we have the war in Europe and the war in the Middle East, but there's many conflicts going on all around the world. The one that comes to mind, of course, is the Ethiopian-Egyptian conflict over the Nile Dam. We're talking about water resources, things that these countries need to survive, need for the populations. And the president has made it clear that it is a personal goal of his to end all of these conflicts around the world. He truly is the peace president.
Waleed, what do you think Vladimir Putin is thinking right now, given what we just saw on the world stage?
You know, he understands that at the end of the day, the international community is going to come and ask both sides, you know, you're the only still fighting hot war. It's not just a territorial matter, a lake here, a problem here. It's really a war that could escalate. And if it escalates between Russia and NATO, and of course with the United States, it would be a danger for the entire world. Now, on the other hand, what Putin really wants is for President Trump to be very clear here, recognize what the leadership of Russia wants on the ground in Ukraine, in eastern Ukraine and the Crimea. So the negotiations really are between President Trump and the Russians on the one hand, and of course with the leadership of Ukraine over land at the end of the day. And these are not easy and simple things, because that would be half of the coast of Ukraine if we go to the nitty-gritty of what the issue is about. But the pressure is growing on both sides to stop the war.
You know, Mariam, you mentioned Ethiopia and Egypt. Let's talk about that, but also let's talk about many of these other conflicts, specifically the DRC, what's going on in Sudan, as well as the Uyghurs in China. Many people attach democracy with free speech and freedom of religion. You can't have a democracy without those two things. What are your thoughts with regard to President Trump when he's able to actually broker peace between Ukraine and Russia to focus on many of these other conflicts around the world, as he's done in the first 8 months of his presidency?
Absolutely. Look, what we're seeing from the president's diplomacy team, whether it's Witkoff or Secretary of State Rubio, is that they're really assembling an Avengers, so to speak, of folks who are interested, vested, and capable of achieving peace throughout all different continents, across different issues and wars. And to your point about Egypt and Ethiopia, thankfully it hadn't turned into kinetic or a hot war yet, but it definitely had potential to. And I think it was important that the president has made it clear that that is a non-starter and that Egypt and Ethiopia must come to the table. What's interesting about Africa, as you aptly pointed out, is it is a competition ground for regional powers. We've seen in the last few years China really advance in Africa, whether it's the Belt and Road Initiative or other investments that they've really carved ground out in Africa. And what this administration is doing is trying to win some of that back. Obviously, we have vested interest in the success of all these African nations. The United States, out of all countries in the world, has interest in making sure that no hot wars or even cold wars break out across this continent.
Yeah, and we will be watching the president meet with Zelensky on Friday. I think that will be a major indication of Ukraine, Russia, and then who knows, President Trump will continue in that vein, solving the world's crises. He's done an incredible job. But Waleed Phares, Mariam Wahba, thank you both for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.